Good afternoon, everybody. So as Jimmy introduced me, I'm James Belding, CEO of Tokenized. So Tokenized is a company that broadly is trying to build solutions to give regular people, businesses, governments access to the value in the Bitcoin blockchain. We're a company that recently released the Tokenized protocol, the beta release. So this is an improvement over what we'd released before for the contest. So before this time, we had a alpha version out, and that was with the white paper detailed. Now that was something that I was really proud of, but it was always something that I knew in the back of my mind wasn't where we needed to be. I always had a vision, and a whole team had a vision actually, for something much bigger, and we couldn't do it at the time because the op-return payload was too small. We just couldn't fit what we needed to fit in there. But in February, when Shatters managed to fix the protocol, we were able to get the space that we needed, and we basically just dropped everything we were doing and started focusing on fulfilling that vision. So that vision, in broad strokes, is sort of what I characterize as the dream that we have, but also a dream that I feel most people share in the fintech space, even beyond the crypto space. And that's really applying modern technology, internet, web technologies, all the fintech stuff that we're seeing come out, and consolidating it all and to make it an incredible experience, a really simple experience. So more how I see that is ultimately how this is going to play out is eventually going to be one hub, one app that everyone has, and there may be many apps out there that do this for these people, like different competitors, but that app will be your portal to everything, your portal to all finance, to all contracts, to everything that's of consequence to you, the records that you have in your life that allow you to engage in voluntary exchange. And that's where I think that voluntary exchange itself can be made much simpler through these tools. And what I think is really important is that this dream that's been shared for a long time was just simply not possible without Bitcoin, and in particular, Bitcoin SV. So it's really exciting. This is an awesome time. So the mission for us, we believe that voluntary exchange is the beating heart of our global community, and that every trade makes the world a little bit better. So this is really important. This is how everything, the engine of the world. So what we want to do is take Bitcoin SV and the Tokenized protocol and make it simpler, faster, cheaper. Really good recipe for improving things, I think. So looking back in time and giving us some perspective and thinking about where we've come and where we're going, I mean, we come from simple times, right? People were hunter-gatherers. You didn't really think about complex contracts. You didn't think about managing resources into the future. Well, times have changed. We all know that. We all appreciate that. But things are going to get more and more complex as we go, as we get more sophisticated technology, as we start to think farther into the future to achieve these goals. And this is important because we are expanding our time horizons. And when we do that, it means more records. Our memories are limited. We can only think so far back or remember so far back in time and think so far into the future. So in order to actually handle these time horizons, we need to really plan and record our data and be able to learn from those experiences and continue to project further into the future. So this is another thing where the blockchain, I think, is going to be really important. So the focus of the Tokenized protocol, the one that was released recently, is really about records that we generate or we capture from our interactions in the market. So entities interacting with other entities, whether those entities are an employer-employee relationship, where you've got contracts, employment agreements, NDAs, getting paid, et cetera, or even into like government agencies, public companies, suppliers, contractors, all these different relationships. So they all have records, things that are really important. If there's disputes, if things don't go well, if risks aren't managed properly, then you need to have some guidance about what was agreed to, how the rules are going to play out, how we divvy up the resources. So as a result of kind of that trend I was saying about how we're moving into more complexity, and we have moved into a lot of complexity, and we're going to continue to do so, we're going to have to end up dealing with this complexity by having more relationships, more cooperation, bigger networks, more specialization, and as a result, the complexity is already insane. So I think everyone knows like the classic case where you click, I agree with terms and conditions, or you've got a credit card statement that has, or a credit card contract that has just a ridiculous amount of information in it with fine print everywhere. I don't really reasonably think that most people read that stuff at all, and I think it's gotten to a point where people just roll the dice and see how things go and suffer the consequences. And often they just pay, they get penalized and they pay for it. So I believe that Bitcoin SV, Tokenized protocol, and really good software can make this a lot simpler. This is what we can do to make that dream come true. So what is the Tokenized protocol? So it's an application layer protocol that sits on top of the Bitcoin SV. So everything, the messages that are involved are all stored and passed through the network. We focus on financial, legal, commercial, and accounting activities, so all the records and data that's generated from those activities. And we're looking to replace SWIFT, which is like the bank-to-bank financial messaging standard, FIX, which is more of like a securities exchange standard, trading stocks and financial instruments. X12 is like EDI, so purchase orders, invoices, quotes, requests for quotes, shipping notices, all that kind of information, which again has legal consequences, or at least it does in terms of commercial agreements. So tokens are a building block of the protocol. This is one of the things that we think are going to allow us to deliver on this promise. And what a token is, if we boil it down to what we all sort of feel it is, or we understand, is really just a digital record of ownership. So that record of ownership can be anything. So if you think into financial instruments, obviously shares, bonds, all that type of stuff, the rights to interest payments or the rights to the dividends from a company, but then also like utility tokens, tickets, the right to access a concert, the right to get on a bus and travel. So smart contracts is the other sort of pillar of our tokenized protocol. This is the way we've approached this is basically an autonomous agent that reads the blockchain and writes to the blockchain. So this is where the messaging on the blockchain happens. So everything of consequence to the contract, all the terms and conditions, the actions, the changes, the transfers of title, all happen on the chain. So the smart contract simply facilitates that. So the way that this sort of works is a user or an issuer will determine what kind of contract they want, right? And they'll fill all the terms and conditions out the way they want it to go, and they'll publish that to the blockchain, and they'll have spun up a smart contract that will read that and will respond by forming the contract, as long as that contract was basically in accordance to the tokenized protocol. So once you've got that contract formed, you can then do all kinds of things. You can issue tokens from it. You can enforce certain conditions. You can do governance on it. All these types of actions, which all end up being focused on the blockchain. So a common concern that people have is that you've got an off-chain agent doing the work. What happens if someone hacks it? Or what if someone changes the terms and conditions that the contract is adhering to? Well, it's not possible, or it is possible, but it would be consequential. All of the messages that are important are on-chain, so if there's ever a discontinuity on-chain, you'd be able to tell right away, and it would be easily provable, and the person that was running that contract would easily be taken to court. So the actual operation of a smart contract is very much a responsibility, not really no power involved. It's a very difficult thing to do well, but it's a very just administrative type task. A lot of responsibility involved. So one of the key things with smart contracts is that signatures, like handwritten signatures that we see today, and the whole very archaic way that we do contracts today are going to be replaced into a total digital realm. So no more paper, no more actual handwritten signatures. Everything's going to be done the traditional way with digital signatures like ECDSA, which is how Bitcoin works today. And all of the agreements or all the basic requirements of a contract have been embedded into the tokenized protocol. So those are the common accepted requirements for a lawful contract. So who can benefit? Everyone. So this is something that we think kind of like an iPhone or email, in that business people use an iPhone the same way as regular people use an iPhone, right? The tools available to you there and the requirements, the needs are the same. And we think that the same applies to contracts. The same applies to finance and managing your money and budgeting. And so this even applies to government agencies. And we are tooling or building our tools to suit everyone. I think it's a really important. And I think if you really think about how even a person who just works a basic job, doesn't really get involved in legal entities, doesn't start a company, doesn't have a trust or anything like that, they still end up getting involved in a lot of contracts in their life. And I think they still benefit from the management of it in this kind of fashion. So how are we going to accomplish this? So as I said before, it's really the software I think is the most tricky part, where the most work comes into it, but the enabling technology is Bitcoin SV. So we want to reduce complexity, and we want to basically make it a lot easier to comply with important rules. So a good example is, let's say you're starting a company and you have to follow all the procedures of getting consent from directors and get your share certificates issued and formalize a shareholder agreement or a constitution, and doing it all in the right process. And then subsequently, as you manage your company and transfer rights and change things as you go, we want to be able to put that all into software, so that when you go to make this happen in our little app or another app like that, and you try to make that change, it will restrict you or it will guide you to make sure that you make the right decisions or you do the right things in the right sequence. So Bitcoin, what's amazing about it is a long-term source of truth, and it's reliable enough that you're not going to have to worry about keeping paper backups. So this is a pretty important part. The things that make life a lot easier. And of course, extremely low cost issuance, management, exchange of tokens. So we're talking in the low cents range. So key features of the smart contracts. So we've got built-in governance and enforcement tools. So even beyond forming a company and going through all those processes, actually the governance of the company or the organization that you have, you can do all of that on chain. So it's again auditable, immutable trail of evidence and the actions that took place. But also again, software can guide you and make it easier and make the process very intuitive. Enforcement tools are really important because they are what allow companies to actually do things they want to do with their shares and their tokens that they've issued. But also it means that governments can actually enforce property rights. So critical to this whole thing working is these are real securities, these are real financial instruments that are going to have legal consequence, which is why they have value, why you're going to be able to make money from them. And as a result, you need to have property rights enforced. So you need the support of the courts, you need police, the law enforcement agencies to understand, be able to work with it, and be able to do the things that they need to do to enforce those property rights. So the key ones with enforcement tools is basically like freezing tokens and then thawing them if you need to thaw them, and then confiscation, really, really important parts. So our protocol has sort of standardized a lot of what tokens you're going to be using. So we call them asset types, and we've got 5 or 6 right now that are publicly released with all the metadata structured out, so you just basically need to fill the form in essentially, but we got 40 plus more coming. So basically every financial instrument you can think of, every utility token, and we're also willing to engage, or very happy to engage with the community. So if use cases come up that we haven't considered, we really want to take that into account and make the changes necessary so that we can incorporate you. But we do like to have this sort of standardization so that it makes things easier, it simplifies things. So when you're viewing a whole bunch of different financial assets, you'll recognize patterns, you'll know which ones are which, and it'll make the experience a lot easier. So ultra fast clearing and settlement time. So this is, a lot of people talk about blockchain and being T0 and being able to do all this stuff. Well, Bitcoin SV is really able to do that. So a lot of the other ones are not able to do it the way they say they are, or at least to the same standard. The 2 seconds is a little more complicated how I got to that argument, and I'm happy to discuss it if you want to come up to the booth or something like that, I can get the details, but I'm very, very confident it's going to be in that range. Identity oracles. So this is a really important feature that we've just released, and it was never part of the alpha protocol. It's one of a few different types of oracles that we're going to be releasing, but this is the one that really is really important for this next step of SEOs maturing and becoming a mainstream product. So what it allows is the exchange of tokens, the transfer tokens, to comply with KYC rules so that the person who's receiving it is definitely being ID'd. So that's something that isn't really possible in a practical way yet with most cryptocurrencies out there or blockchains, but this way is very, very practical, and it still preserves that pseudonymous private characteristics that the Bitcoin chain has for normal transactions. So why should companies care, and what are some of the benefits to them? Well, they automate the admin of corporate governance, as I said before, really important, and I think it's something going to be appreciated a lot more, especially in the smaller business and smaller and medium-sized businesses who don't have like lawyers on call. Issue and acquire financial products, coupons, all the asset types, more directly and cheaply, and being able to do it, interact with your customers in a more direct way. No more middlemen with all these aspects or assets. And smart contracts to ensure that all tokens comply with any set of laws. So it's very much built for a global adoption. It doesn't matter what your country believes in or what rules are temporarily in effect, or if they change, it can always comply and adjust. It's that flexible. So government agencies, so why should they care? Well, they can reduce the legal burden or the burden on legal and law enforcement agencies. So the simplicity of contracts, if we can start to standardize and guide people in a way that the patterns start to emerge that are very commonly accepted, kind of like how civil law contracts often differ a little bit from common law contracts in that they have very standard type agreements built into a certain type of contract. So I think we can do similar things and extend that to establishing like clauses and types of contracts that are hashed, so you can prove or you be certain that they're a common accepted clause that everyone uses and is accepted to be fair. I think that type of stuff can have a huge impact on the whole ecosystem, and being able to accept contracts a lot easier without having teams of lawyers go through it and make sure it's all the same. You'll be able to go through and say, yes, this is a very common contract, the exact same type I've signed before, the same type as 50,000 other people use today and are very happy with, and have been tested in court. So tokens can even extend to things like citizenship, entry visas, passports. So I think this ushers in a new era for governance, like elections, national elections and things like that. Convenience, bring your phone into it. You can start using that, as well as you can still use cards and like physical passports as well. So it does bridge that world. Also, this is a really important one, and I hope this is the future, and I believe it will be. Central bank issued fiat tokens, currency tokens. So I actually have a model for this, how I think this will play out. But I think this is actually going to happen a lot quicker than a lot of people think. I think the reason is that for central banks, the money that they issue is still a product. It still needs demand from the market. And right now what they're facing is technology around them making other types of systems faster, better user experience, and they're lagging behind. And people are frustrated, and they're going to need to step up their game. And I think something like this on Bitcoin SV is the answer. And I think they're going to realize it very quickly. And yeah, national elections, so huge cost savings to be had there. So all very, very possible, and done from any internet-connected device, mobile, web. You don't have to go down to a poll station and vote. All very convenient. So this is, I'm not sure if you'll see this, but this is my sort of basic model. There's a couple of different models I've proposed, but how a central bank can actually run a smart contract themselves and issue currency tokens for their national currency. And so I've included the chartered banks as well in the banking system, and I show basically how this thing is supposed to all function together. And what it also requires is money market instruments that can be tokens, like short-term loans, short-term debt, but also demand deposits. The DDP in the corner here, where you got depositors depositing money into the charter bank, that's effectively a token that represents a loan to the bank, which is what you do when you deposit money into a bank. You're loaning it to them, right? And they pay you interest, and they use that money as working capital and lend it on and make money themselves. So what this represents is a change, a paradigm shift, where you can actually have a wallet and you can have a fiat token that you don't need the bank's infrastructure, you don't need their security, you don't need their user experience, their web portal, anything like that. You can just have the token that they guarantee and that they use to give you interest, and in return, they can have your money to loan out and be a lender. But that's an interesting paradigm shift, I think, that a lot of people haven't thought about yet, which I hope they start to think about. So individuals and families, a single portal for your entire financial and legal lives. So this is really important, makes things a lot easier. Automated accounting, taxes, reminders, and compliance. So again, easier, make your life easier. A little phone app pops up, notification says you gotta pay this, or remember your contract expires. Makes it easy. And then you can press a button and it renews the contract, or you can get a new one set up and sign it right away from your phone. Instant credit checks, no more filling out paperwork, no more filling out the same details over and over again. Your address, your name, over and over again. Every single new supplier that you work with, every credit, applying for another mortgage, a different company, it's always the same information. Let's cut all that out and go to the source and just have one set of data, fill it in once, and then that be it forever. Then transaction fees that are so low that even very low net worth individuals can easily diversify their holdings. So I think that's another thing that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And yeah, that's it. Thanks very much for your time.